my name is Margarita Woc Colburn. So I'm a veterinary college, 2003 grad.
So what did you do after vet school?
So after vet school, so veterinarian, I went and did a small animal internship in Massachusetts. So that's to get that experience, like clinical experience in working with dogs and cats and some exotics. My ultimate goal was to go and do a zoo and wildlife residency. So I didn't do quite the direct path that usually you go internship, residency. I did internship, decided I wanted to live in Seattle for a couple years. So I ended up working at a 24/7 critical care facility, working on cats and dogs and small mammals like ferrets.
Okay.
And then I did a zoo medicine and surgery residency that took me over to Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C. And then after that, I worked as a zoo veterinarian for 15 years. When I initially lived in Latin America, we had a whole bunch of different animals, macaws, raccoons, dogs, cats. I even had a cricket. And then I always wanted to be able to provide like a good healthcare. Like I saw the veterinarian there and everything that they could do. So it was something that as a little kid, I was like, I want to be a vet. But then throughout high school and then undergrad, I was really involved in conservation biology. And I wanted to sort of combine the both. So I thought, why not go the zoo and wildlife route? So, and one of my mentors was like, do zoo medicine first, if you want to do wildlife research and everything, but you get a steady job in a way. But I also have the capability of working in conservation programs and everything. So that's sort of where I went. A lot of it is learning as you go.
So what was your approach to talking to people? It sounds like you are talking to everyone under the sun. I mean, when you're asking people for help, what is that like?
I mean, it's just, I would say like both my undergraduate and vet school helped prepare it. I mean, we're always talking to like professors, to like our mentors, to like our colleagues, like our classmates and everything. So a lot is just reaching out. I would say zoo medicine, it's a very small field. Feels sometimes large, but when you compare it to some of the other ones. But even in the training, they always told us, hey, if you need advice from a small animal internist or an equine, just call them up, and everybody is really happy to like help you. So best thing is giving them a call, email. People do the same for me when I have something that they might say, hey, I need help for this. I try, or I tell them, hey, I don't know, but hey, I know someone who does.
So shifting gears a little, what has been like the most rewarding part of like your career, either just your job with the Smithsonian? What has been the most rewarding part, I think, in your field?
So there's been a lot. So during my residency at Smithsonian, I had the opportunity to go to Namibia, and I went with one of my mentors, and we did exams on 40 cheetahs. And this was working with the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And since then, I've eventually became a scientific advisor for them. If they have some questions, they can ask me, and I try to help them. They have multiple veterinarians that are involved in that. But it was an opportunity that started as my residency, and then I sort of took it on over the last 15 years. And then I would say the other one was my first job after my residency. I was in Nashville Zoo in Tennessee. And that's one of the first times I got to work with giant anteater. What worked, what didn't. And it's something that grew my passion that eventually became one of the veterinary advisors for it.
Who knew anteaters, liked country music? Apparently, they're in Nashville.
Yeah, there are multiple places, but Nashville has one of the largest ones.
Wow.
They had, while I was there, they had several successful breedings, so I was able to learn how to hand rear an anteater. It was interesting. So it was. So with the long tongue, you're trying to put a bottle, and they had this part that you had to be careful that they didn't swallow their tongue, which I never thought would be possible.
Wow.
But I found out it can. So learn new tips and tricks, and now I pass it on to other people that get it.
So, like, in a profession where you grow as you go, what advice do you have to students who are truly currently growing and going as they finish Cornell, but as they go into their career?
I would say for them is I know some of them go with the, hey, I need to go and like internship residency and I need to do this, and in 10 years I need to be there. A lot, I'm like, sometimes go with the flow, is like have a loose sense of where you want to go, but some opportunities might come up that are not what you scheduled or what you planned, but sometimes they're the ones that will give you the most rewards or open you up to other possibilities. So it's one of be flexible, be open, always keep learning. As SUVETs, we're always reading the literature, going to conferences, like always learning from each other. And always being open to reach out to your colleagues, mentors, anything. And then also, this probably will date me, but it's being MacGyver. There's like this movie MacGyver, the guy that would come up and would make things from like duct tape and be like,
he had all the little tools and everything. He knew how to do stuff.
So a lot, I would say, Sioux medicine, sometimes you have to do like a MacGyver, I call it like MacGyverism, but it's like you sometimes come up and you're like, what do I have? I had like a clouded leopard. It was a baby. We needed to do a split. And I was like, okay, I can't use the traditional ones because it's too heavy. And I was like, oh, look, we have styrofoam and we can make booties, and then create a one and like did something. I was like, oh, it actually worked. Could never reproduce it again.
So what happens when something doesn't work? When you're like, okay, MacGyvering did not work.
Yeah.
What do I do now? How do you go about that?
I think a lot is problem solving. And I would say that was one of the things at Cornell, because of the case-based learning, they always taught you, like sort of looking at the problem, sort of different solutions. And you have to be able to pivot. Sometimes you're like, hey, I tried this. Okay, didn't work. Take a step back and then be like, can I do something else? Obviously, we're sometimes dealing with really sick animals. They can't tell you because they're still wild, even though they're in the zoos and everything. Sometimes all you have to do is learn from that case, that if another similar case pops up, you're like, okay, I tried this, it didn't work. We gave it a best in that one, but I learned something from that. In medicine, we do a lot of necropsies and everything. So we're always learning from the cases and then sort of pivoting or expanding our knowledge and saying, okay, from those failures, what did we learn? What can we do better for the next case?
Yeah, I love that. When I was in elementary school, they say failure leads to success. And they had like a little motion too. And it's harder to see it in practice, I think, especially at Cornell.
It is, especially if you're dealing with sometimes life and death. And it's something that can make it challenging because, sometimes you feel like, oh no, I failed my patient or anything. I try to sometimes see it with, okay, I tried my best. I did everything and I utilized everything that I knew at that moment. Now I've learned something new from this, whether it was how they responded to the treatment or the lack of response, or what we found on necropsy afterwards and being like, oh, it was more this. So maybe I need to try this new type of therapy or new way of approaching it. So I would say in Sioux medicine, we're always learning new things and utilizing our failures to help us succeed in the next one.
Last question out of personal curiosity. Besides the anteater and the cheetah, what has been the most like wackiest animal you've worked with?
Oh my gosh, that could be weird. Trying to think of wacky because like each of them have their own things. I would say One challenging can sometimes be an armadillo because they have
Their shell. I'm from
the
Texas,
carapace,
so
yeah.
we know armadillos.
So trying to do x-rays on that tends to make it, like it tends to be harder to see what's going inside. Another one that's somewhat similar would be working on porcupines. So I had, because of the quills, so the quills always like overlay and you're like, what's going on? But fun fact, I found out for an African crested porcupine, some of them have like a fragile skin syndrome. So they can they have it so that if an animal goes and bites them, they take a chunk out of their skin and then they'll eventually heal. Um, but I found it the hard way. And when he was recovering, he ended up taking a piece of his skin. So we had to re anesthetize him and then trying to close it back up. I found out that it made it really, really difficult. And that was one of the times that we had to try different things. We tried like putting a little vest, like a little shirt, found out that onesies really worked.
Baby onesies.
Yeah, baby. Like it was like the large, he was smallish.
He was small, but a large baby, of course.
But it was when we had to do wound changes, we did it like frequent bandage changes and stuff. And then we put a onesie so that he wouldn't be able to rub it off. And then it would, like help keep it. And then we would anesthetize him like 2 days later, walk it in there. And then he would get a onesie. So we decorated it. His name was Kiazi. So
a porcupine in a onesie would make for such great meme content, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was interesting.
In the viral baby porcupine.
Yeah, no, because he was in there and it was like to help keep the quill so that he wouldn't actually be able to lift and move it as much. So yeah, that was one of the times of like weirdness that I was like, really? Okay.
Like, sure, that's going to work. It's going to work.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was amazing. You have such a cool job. You have such a cool career progression too.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so great to hear like just passionate people have such great jobs from their passion.
Yeah, and I would say that's the best thing is, if I had to give one advice is follow your passion. And that's like in college and like undergrad and then grad school, it's always be willing to change or explore. That's probably the time. And then, go for it. And then you might need to explore another along the way too. But being open.
It's grow as you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.